Feeding Tampa Bay is the hub for hunger relief throughout our 10-county region, distributing a variety of foods through their own programs and a network of 400-plus agency partners. Together, last year, they distributed 95 million meals to support our area's food insecure, with the support of 4,800 volunteers per month. If you're interested in making a difference in our community, then I encourage you to join us on today's Bayside because we're talking about feeding Tampa Bay. Good morning and welcome to Bayside. I am your host, Shelly Sanders. Like I said before, we're talking about feeding the citizens and people of our community here in Tampa Bay. What better organization to talk about to do that than Feeding Tampa Bay? And I can't think of a better person to talk to than their CEO and president, Thomas Mance. Welcome back to the show.
It's nice to see you again, Shelly. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. I love having you guys on. First of all, it's sort of bittersweet.
Yeah.
It's always wonderful to see all the incredible things that you guys do here in the community, in the Tampa Bay area, how many people you feed.
Right.
On the other hand, I'd love to see the need for your organization not be there. So.
Yeah, it's when you were introducing, I was thinking the term we often use to describe the folks in our community that we're privileged to serve as neighbors. I think one of the hard things for all of us is it's sometimes easy to think about folks that need as them, but the reality is that they're friends and neighbors and colleagues and people we know, people that we might see for our haircuts or that might perform maintenance on something in our house or teach our children.
Sure.
And I think the thing that all of us have to wrestle with as a community is understanding that this is an us problem, not a them problem. I always hope that more than anything else, that's the connection that people make, because I think once you kind of feel like it's an us opportunity,
right.
As you said at the start, if you want to get involved,
Right.
When it's about us, I find people are much more likely to say, hey, I do want to connect.
Absolutely. After all, at the end of the day, you never know when it might be you. And certainly with the circumstances that we have all seen over the last few years, things have dramatically changed for so many people.
Yeah, I remember early on in the pandemic, and of course we continue to go back to that. I think it's altered the way all of us think and look at our community. But we saw time and again, in fact, we did some survey work that suggested that 68% of the people in our food lines in early days, first 90 days after the pandemic hit us, had never been in a food line before. Imagine that, 7 out of 10 had never been in a food line before. And many times, often, they were people that said, I used to volunteer with you, I used to donate to you. I never imagined I'd be in a place where I would have to use your services. So I think that told us something else which is important, and it's part of what we're thinking about today, which is that a lot of households were already on unstable footing to begin with.
Sure.
Right? That there were a lot of challenges that were there already, and the pandemic hit people pretty hard. Now we've moved from that into some financial challenges. And so it's been a tough go for an awful lot of our friends and neighbors.
Absolutely. So, Thomas, I know we're kind of just jumping right on in. Let's back up just a smidgen, because there are people that are new to the area. We have an insane amount of people moving to the state on a daily basis. We live in a wonderful state and in paradise for a lot of people, and at the same time, this paradise has become a little bit more of a challenge than what they've bargained for. So for those individuals that may be tuning in today that this is the first time they're hearing of Feeding Tampa Bay. Maybe they are in this situation or on the brink of this situation, or perhaps they're not, and on the flip side, they're looking for somewhere to give back. So let's talk about, I know I kind of alluded to it in the beginning, but what you guys do here and some of the goals that you have set. Sure. It's incredible. So let's talk about that. Walk me through the process of what you do, what you see on a daily basis.
Yeah, so what we do is pretty simple. As an organization, we really try to provide enough food or resources or both that we can stabilize families who are in need, but also develop pathways out for folks that have an opportunity to move past our services. So the way that we think about that, first we want a hunger-free Tampa Bay by 2025. And when we say that, people go, well, that's not possible, or what does that mean? It's pretty simple in some ways. We want to make sure that every person that has want or need of a meal gets that. First and foremost, it's an emergency response, it's a humane response, and it's an important response. So whether you're a child or a family or a senior, you need to make sure that you have good, nutritious food on your table. That's our first responsibility, and that involves a lot of our work. But the second part that we want, when we look at that, food is really a conversation about health. The outcome we want is health. Right? So anybody that's ever had kids, what did you put in their stomach before they went to school? You know, when you're seniors, you look at diet to make sure that you can maintain your health. All of us want the healthy outcomes from food. But we also understand when someone comes to see us for a meal, it's not necessarily food that's troublesome. It's a household that has a variety of different challenges.
Like
my rent just went through the roof. During pandemic, I lost income, or I don't quite make enough, or food prices have continued to escalate, or we had a family crisis of some sort that eroded our ability to take care of our family. So when those things happen, we want to say, well, okay, here's a meal. Let's make sure you and your family are fed for the next couple of days. And we do that with groceries, and we also have cooked, prepared meals. But then we also want to have a conversation and say, well, what else is happening?
Right.
What's going on in your world? So sometimes we can hook people up with benefits they may not know about, right? So a mom might find out about WIC or CHIP, which are programs to make sure children are fed.
Sure.
Right? And if they don't know that that benefit exists, they're not taking advantage of it.
And I got to think a lot of people don't know they
don't.
exist because, going back to your first point, with 70% increase in people that had never even experienced hard times like this.
Yeah, and Shelley, if we could change one narrative, it would be that people live on government support. The reality is government support really impacts very few people, and most people that we hook up with any type of support are in it transitionally, and most don't know about it. So it is an opportunity to bring more income, because if suddenly you're connecting someone with a benefit that they didn't know about, they have a bit more money in their checkbook. Mm-hmm. But we also make sure that people are referred to veteran services, mental health services, job services, other partners and programs where we might not necessarily do something, but we can say, you have this issue, here, go here. So those 400 different agencies you mentioned, along with another 300 or 400 other partners, we're kind of that first step into that opportunity. So we make sure we connect everybody with those types of resources, and then our long-term plan, we set people up with jobs, because an income is the best way, good income is the best way to create long-term success for anyone.
Absolutely, and it totally makes sense, Thomas, because when you talk about it, food, hunger, the lack of hunger is the basis, the foundation for successful life in general. When you're starving, what do? And desperate times call for desperate measures.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions you asked me about, which,
and we'll get into that in just a minute, Thomas. Sorry to cut you off here, but I want to let everyone know at home, you're looking at the website right there. That is feedingtampabay.org. Perhaps we've struck a chord with you. Maybe you need assistance, or perhaps you'd like to help out in some way, shape, or form. Either way, whatever the mystery is there for you, this is the website that you're going to go to. It's going to tell you all that and then some. Everything that Thomas and I talk about on today's Bayside is on that website. Why don't you go check it out while we go to break? Welcome back to Bayside. I'm your host, Shelley Sanders. We're going to continue our conversation with Thomas Mance, the president and CEO of Feeding Tampa Bay. Thomas, I know when we left on break, we had been talking about kind of an overview perspective of what you all do, and I absolutely love the idea that you're more than the Band-Aid on a bleed, on a severe bleed at that. You're not only offering, hey, listen, you're hungry at this moment, here's a meal. Yes, we've got a food pantry, the list goes on. but you're also a resource center. So you have the ability to help these people because ultimately there's a reason why they're there. There's a reason why you're hungry, you don't have the food at home, and that usually comes down to some sort of financial problem, be it a job, whatever, the list goes on as well. So let's talk about how that relates to how many people you're able to facilitate and where that need comes and what the outcome is. And I know you've gotten over the years you've had to kind of shift that according to what's going on a even a global basis as well as here locally, and as you realize what the needs are too, that changes things.
Yeah, and so maybe just to put in context numbers, because sometimes people want to understand. So we service 10 counties, as you said. There's about 4.4 million people there. 1 million of them right now are considered food insecure every single day.
Wow.
1 million folks. The easier way to remember, if you want to remember a number, 1 out of 4 children, 1 out of 7 adults are considered food insecure. Right. When we cite numbers, it can be kind of disconnected. But when you kind of adjust to the concept of 1 in 4 children in our community today don't have a stable food resource.
Right.
I think that scares all of us a little bit.
It is. It should be frightening. I mean, just look out into your neighborhood, and if you see a group of 10 kids, that right there is two of them.
Right.
2 of them could be starving.
Yep. And I think one of the things we all believe, and I know anybody would agree with this, making sure that a child has the resources they need is a smart idea. So, for example, as you think about solutions and things that we've looked to do, over the past 3 years, we've put 75, almost 80 pantries inside of schools.
Wow.
Right? So it's a better way to make sure kids have food, but it ties that to education, right? In order to learn, you have to be fed, right? So I think for us as an organization, going back to the question that you asked us, we're aware that a meal is important, but we're also aware that a pathway forward is just as important. And our question as an organization is, how do we take the guest that comes to us, and as we would say, they came in for a meal, how do we get them to walk out with a future?
Right. And how do you do that, Thomas?
Well, I think there are different ways. I think we see a pretty simple formula. Food for today, make sure you have meals. Food for tomorrow, make sure you have access to benefits and resources. And food for a lifetime, which is access to a job and income. Because what's really happening in the state of Florida, wonderful state, as you said, paradise, a great place to live, an awful lot of our folks just don't earn enough money. Shelley, most of the people we serve have a job, rent their own homes, pay taxes. They're a part of our economy. They're a part of our infrastructure, but they just don't earn enough. And so when you look at something like the recent impact of rent, gas prices, and food, for families like ours that we serve, that's been devastating. Sure. And so they just don't have enough money. It's not like they're not working.
And now
it's
you
not
have
like
new
they don't.
Families that you wouldn't have served prior to all of this. It's
and so the question becomes, what do you do? An organization like ours seeks to step into that moment, into that crisis with our neighbors.
Right. And so to your point, what do? You can't do things without assistance. That requires not just volunteers and financial donations from citizens, but it also requires partners.
Yes.
And so it's a great blessing to be able to have those. And talk to me a little bit about what that means and who these partners are and how that kind of knits together some of those resources and in looking forward for these.
Yeah, and one of the things we're aware of as a food bank, and it goes back to where you started the conversation, more people will come in for food than all of the charities combined, all of the resources. Because if you think about it, when you're at home and you're struggling with all these things in your household budget and issue, the one thing you can't struggle with, you have to find food.
Sure.
So our conversation as an organization became, well, how do we do a better job at capturing that moment and bringing more resources and partners around that? Right, so what do we do? So 15 miles from here, we have a community empowerment center that we built here in Pinellas County. And that community empowerment center is kind of a model of how we think. So if someone walks into that empowerment center, they can sit down and have a prepared meal. They can get a to-go meal. They can go to a pantry that's there and shop. But we also bring in other partners who will sit down and help folks find housing assistance, help folks find pathways to getting something resolved like your driver's license. We have English as a second language courses taught there. So what we're trying to do in that moment when someone shows up, how do we bring a whole bunch of different resources around at that time so that the person can resolve as many issues that are facing them at one moment as they can.
And you do that by this community.
And we do it in other ways. Wherever we're out in the community across the 10 counties, we try and make sure we bring other resources and partnerships together. Because food is a symptom, it's not the underlying problem.
Absolutely. Food is the symptom. So just to put that into perspective, talk to me on numbers for those at home thinking, well, I'd love to help. I don't have a whole lot. $10? What is that going to do?
I think there are two gifts, probably three, that folks can always give us that are critical to our success. The first is the gift of your time. Gotcha. We're a volunteer-based organization, and I think you would know there's nothing more precious than our time.
And if you'd like to volunteer, of course, we just flashed that website up, and there it is again. Volunteer is what Thomas was saying. You can also donate. They'll never say no, turn down money, time, treasure, or talent at all, I am sure, and we'll get more into that, but that's the website right there, feedingtampabay.org, feedingtampabay.org. I always encourage you every single week to get out and get involved in your community. Can't think of better ways to do it than to help out Feeding Tampa Bay. Welcome back to Bayside. I'm your host, Shelley Sanders, continuing our conversation with Thomas Mance. He is the president and CEO of Feeding Tampa Bay. I have to tell you, every time you come, I'm always just like, it's amazing how forward-thinking you all are and how adaptable you are. You have to be in order to survive, and you're doing it for such a beautiful, beautiful reason, and it's more than just feeding, because like you said when we left the last segment, hunger is just the symptom of what the real problem is. So, and you can't overlook it. So one of the things that always is mind-boggling to me, and I absolutely love that you all are so, it's very ambitious. Hunger-free Tampa Bay by 2025. I know people look at you and go, Thomas, what is wrong with you? Tell me about that. Talk to our viewers about what that means and what you're doing and how we're coming along.
Well, and Shelley, when you started, the interview, you mentioned that wouldn't we be in a perfect world where we didn't have to do this, but we do. And so part of our challenge has been, okay, if we understand that folks are going to need, the question is how do we build the best possible response to folks? And Hunger Free Tampa Bay is really an understandable objective to say, make sure you have a meal on a table. So 4 years ago, we provided 55 million meals. Last year it was 95 million. So we've been able to get more and more food into the community.
It does, to quote others, it takes a village, but it really does. And this is our village right here. And that's why I commend you every time you're here. I love that you're doing that for our people, because when you really boil down those numbers and you go back to that 1 in 4 children, 1 in 4 people in general, that really puts it into perspective. Just anywhere you go to a store, look around, you don't know who's hungry. And so coming back to it really takes a community, and that's where you guys can't do this without your partners, without volunteers, without assistance. And so again, I'm going to encourage you at home, for those interested in helping out, if you're looking for that project, if you're looking for something to do, or perhaps you're looking for a place to park some financial assistance, think about it. Hunger is just the symptom of a greater problem, and Feeding Tampa Bay, they offer all the resources in addition to a meal. So doing great things, and they have amazing goals. Look at that, Hunger Free Tampa Bay by 2025. Wouldn't that be wonderful? What a great place to live, right? Well, you can help out. Just log onto their website, figure out how you can do that. All right, we're going to take a short break, but we're coming back after this, so don't go anywhere. As always, I want to thank you at home for joining us this week on Bayside. And of course, Thomas, thank you so much for being here. I absolutely love y'all's passion and how wonderful you are at really facilitating some needs around here for our, I like what you said, neighbors.
Yes.
Keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully we'll have a hunger-free Tampa Bay by 2025. Of course, they can't do it by themselves. They do need some help. So why don't you log on to feedingtampabay.org and figure out how you can help out. And by all means, if you need assistance, give them a call or stop by or log on to the website. They're there for you. All right, neighbors, y'all have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next weekend on Bayside.